Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to check out the Rogue class for Heroes of Hammerwatch 2. It's important to stress that this is not a catch-all, you must do this in order to win at the Rogue kind of video. Like my other guide videos, this is just a reference and indication as to what I do when I play a certain class, but I encourage you to try out your own things, to play the game the way you want to play it, based on the way you like to. Otherwise, it's going to get stale. It's also worth mentioning that the developers are going to be reworking, it looks like, the physical side, the weapon damage side of this game. So these videos may end up being out of date at some point. So if you're watching this way in the future, just be warned, this was made prior to any sort of major patch that addressed weapon damage. Rogue weapons? That's pretty much obvious. I mean, daggers. I mean, you're going to have a choice between dual daggers, which is like it takes up both of your hand slots, or you can do a single dagger and maybe a very low-level shield, which does require a little bit of strength to run, but it does have the nice added benefit of blocking projectiles. So it's up to you on how you want to run that. Personally, I like my dual daggers, so that's what I'm currently running. Let's take a quick look at stats. There are two major ones that I want to bring to your attention. Dexterity, because it gives you spell power along with weapon crit chance and weapon crit damage. All three of these are very important. I highly recommend dexterity. You're also going to want some vitality because at the higher NG levels, these enemies hit a lot harder, so having more health is always a good thing. And typically, this class doesn't have a self-heal. However, there are a few exceptions. The Blades, for example, has a life leech ability. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the other ones that I think you might want to consider. Intelligence. I'm going back and forth with this, and I'm sure you could math the numbers. I'm not going to bother. I'm not a crit chance kind of person. I like sustained damage, but, you know, crit can give you a lot of damage, a lot of burst damage, if you can keep pulling that off. And for that, you may want to consider putting points into intelligence, because that gives you your spell crit chance and spell crit damage. And if you can get a bunch of crit on your spells consistently with the rogue, you can dish out probably more damage than just standard spell attacks would with just dexterity. But you have to keep in mind, you know, dexterity, intelligence, certain pieces of gear require a certain amount. So this is something you're going to have to play with to your liking. So if you want sustained spell power, then dexterity is the way to go, and also with crit weapon chance and damage, dexterity. If you're looking for a bit more, you know, like a spell crit chance kind of thing, maybe throw something into intelligence. Either way, consider throwing a couple of points into focus just to keep your mana up. Fan of Knives, if you're spamming that, is very mana heavy, so you may want to have some extra mana handy. Also, level up your Sorcerer so that you can benefit from the title, which is mana regen. When it comes to attuning trinkets and their priority, again, I would focus on crit chance, crit damage, spell power. I don't believe there's any sort of individual like dexterity or anything like that, but you're going to want some kind of like health and mana regen, because like I said, this class doesn't have a whole lot in the way of health regenning and mana regenning. I mean, yes, it does. It has some, but it's not, say, you're not a warlock and you're not going to be able to life leech the crap out of things unless you're the Blades specialty. And that's even then if you find the right upgrade during your run. So I would recommend, again, spell power and crit. Also vitality, any sort of mana vitality regen. I think those are the big ones that you're going to want to pick up first. When it comes to enchanting, I think this is going to be a matter of taste. Because you can go a number of different ways with this, as I was indicating earlier. You can go pure spell damage, and that way you would want, say, the powerful enchant, which grants you that spell power. However, if you like swinging your daggers at things and want to do more weapon damage, then you may want to consider the mighty as well. And again, not all pieces of gear offer the same keywords either. So you're going to want to look through this and decide what's best. There is an of deflection, which is important for a rogue because it does grant parry. But if you already have, say, 50% parry on something, adding more parry to it, it seems like it only adds 7% if you're already at 50%. So going from 50 to 57% seems kind of a waste to me. I wouldn't bother doing that. I would only do the of deflection if like you have a very low parry because you're using like maybe a one-handed dagger or something that has very low parry on it, I would consider it then. But typically, I don't think that one is of particular interest, at least to me. Stout is good because that's going to give you more health. I think that's going to be great. If you're having some mana concerns, maybe consider Astute. I think that's going to be super helpful as well. And if you can find it, again, each of these offers a little different. Let's go with, say, Nimble, if you want to do dexterity-related upgrades on your attributes. And there's also Insightful. If you're having issues with, say, focus, you may want to consider an Insightful enchant. And I'm sure there is an intelligence one, the keen one in there as well. So if you're looking for a pure crit build, you may want to consider more keen as opposed to dexterity, which is nimble. So like I said, it's all going to depend on what you're going to do, what you're going to aim for. Are you going to go for pure spell power, in which case dexterity is what you want, or are you going to go for more of a crit build, which is more centered around intelligence? Ultimately, that's up to you. But ideally, I would still recommend a little bit of spell power, because, you know, that's guaranteed hitting. And then, of course, that whole vitality one. And again, I always get these confused, but it's on here somewhere. So yeah, mighty powerful also too. It all depends if you want to do weapon damage or spell damage. Highly recommend that. And yeah, the stout one. There we go. So stout, you can't go wrong with stout. That'll keep you alive. There's nothing worse than getting one-shotted at higher NG levels. Magic shop and orb upgrades that I would recommend. And keep in mind, not all of them are listed here. You're going to find ones during your run that will change the way you play. But based on the ones that are currently here, I think this Deadly Aim with Fan of Knives is super important. It increases your crit chance with it, and it can dish out a lot of damage, especially if you're spec'd into, like, say, poison, and you can get poison damage with these Fan of Knives too. This Poison Knives deals additional poison damage. So if you're running the poison specialization, this is going to be a no-brainer. So these two I would definitely recommend doing. This Focused Throw, that's up to you. I find that it helps me to focus my damage and do a lot more, but at the same time, I don't think it's absolutely 100% necessary. Adrenaline, each stack increases your mana regen. I think this is important because the rogue does suffer from some mana issues, especially if you're going to be spamming Fan of Knives. So having that extra mana regen, I think, is useful. I take all 3 stacks if I can, just to avoid anything. If you can get the Mana Crystallizer, which is a trinket, during your run, I think that's going to be super helpful. Having more parry for survivability, I think that's also good to have. I don't worry too much about agile casting. Lethal Opening grants additional crit chance for a short period after evading. Typically, you get a free evade after a certain period of time, so like that's a no-brainer. Having more crit is a good thing. On the move, dashing gains a chance to recharge the guaranteed evasion of sidestep. Also good, so survivability. So these two are really good as well. As far as the rest of these are concerned, those are specialization specific. We'll get into those later. Tavern drinks, there's a few I recommend here. And again, these are things to try. Typically, you're going to be running curse-related stuff already, so I'm not going to bother talking about them. But I would recommend maybe the Impetuous Apprentice because of the reduced spell cooldowns. The more you can cast, say, your specialization's active ability, the better. Again, keep in mind there is a mana cost associated with that. Spell crit chance, that's a huge one, considering that the rogue can do a crap ton of damage with crit. And if you are like actively leveling your intelligence to get that spell crit, then you're going to want this drink absolutely guaranteed. And then Soul Anguish is something to think about. I haven't tried it yet, but it looks interesting. 1.5% weapon mana leech. Mana regen set to 0. So I guess it might be a quick way to get mana back just by shiv. And that way you don't have to rely on trinkets to get your mana regen back to where it needs to be. So consider Soul Anguish, and then also Toxic Twist. If you're going into the poison specialization, I always take this, because that extra poison damage that you do is just amazing. So Toxic Twist, I would recommend this one as well. Weapon Mastery, I mean, I think that's obvious. Daggers. You're going to be shivving a lot. Shiv. So why not shiv harder? That's just Yeah. Whether or not you want to do trinkets first is up to you, but at some point you're going to have enough skill points. Just throw them here. Daggers. And again, at some point, I think they're going to be readdressing the whole weapon damage thing. And when they do, daggers are going to be pretty darn good, especially if you level them up here. Guild titles, I've covered those in a separate video, but I'll cover this again here. The rogue used to be extra money per level, like a percentage. So it used to be the moneymaker. Now they've changed that in a recent patch to be reduced trap damage. It's 0.75% per level, so at level 32 I'm getting roughly 21.41% reduced trap damage, but I still think there could be a better use for the rogue, honestly. Like, I feel like that guild title is kind of like, I still feel like the developers are playing around with that to find the best title for him, because you've got gentle traps now, and you can even turn on safe corridors. So I feel like that's still not a full utilization of that particular guild title. So I'm hoping the developers change that again at some point in the future and make this a bit better. Maybe some crit. Maybe increased crit chance or crit damage, something. As far as the skill trainer is concerned, we'll just touch on the basic skills. Fan of Knives is a physical and a spell, so physical tag, very important. In fact, a lot of these have physical. So if you're going to be, taking buffs, look for that physical tag. But I digress. Fan of Knives, level this up all the way. It can do a crap ton of damage, but the cooldown on it is very quick, so you can also run out of mana very quickly too. So once you master that whole mana thing, that mana problem, this is a very powerful spell. And, I typically spam this at bosses. That's just me. Now, the next one over, Flurry of Blades, maybe it's just me, but I never use this, so I just spec'd out of it. Maybe there's something about it that I'm missing, that maybe there's a good upgrade for it that I needed to take in order for it to be good, but it was clogging up my orb upgrades as I was on my run, so I just spec'd out of it, and that was it. Slice and Dice, I think this is important. Weapon speed per stack and stack duration, keeping that up. Just more damage per second. I mean, that's just... Typically, you're trying to kill stuff before stuff kills you. You're not a warlock, right? So you can't life leech every couple of seconds. Unless you're unless you're Blades and you have that one orb upgrade, which I'll get to later. Sidestep, evasion, very important. You've got parry and you've got evasion. And that's one of the main ways that rogues tend to stay alive. So, if anything, I would max out Fan of Knives and Slice and Dice and Sidestep, but Flurry of Blades, at least that's what I think. Lastly, we'll talk about our specializations, and I guess we'll go with, on my list I have Poison, so I guess we'll go with that first. Okay, so Poison is my favorite out of all of them, although Blades is up there. I'm starting to like Blades, but Poison, the reason I use this, I NG push with this mainly, and this Toxic Cloud ability is really powerful. It clears enemies in the hallways, it does decent damage to bosses. The only thing that sucks about it is that it remains stationary, so you have to find ways to constantly keep it up, and in which case you'll need to work on your spell cooldowns, keep your mana going, that kind of thing. But because this is a poison spec, the poison mastery, it increases your poison damage and the chance to inflict vulnerability. That's big. So with this particular spec, any chance you get to increase poison damage, you're going to want to take it. So there's coded weapons, for example, deadly toxins. These are orb upgrades that you're going to want to prioritize. There's also that evasion and toxic cloud upgrade. You can take that for survivability, but I don't always count on it. My biggest focus with this particular spec is finding ways to make my poison more powerful, just so I can blow things up a lot faster. So I typically run with this. And Fan of Knives, also an important part of this. You're going to be using Toxic Cloud, put that up, and then Fan of Knives. But you got to watch your mana, and you got to watch your cooldowns and all that jazz. So Poison, that's what I'm currently running. It's my favorite. But Demolitions, we'll jump into that. This is my least favorite, and I gave it the old college try. I really did. And it was fun. There's a couple of orb upgrades that made the grenade really useful, one of which was the incendiary grenade. It drops fire whenever you use it, so, it leaves behind a fiery thing like the flame wall does, and it does damage, but I feel like it didn't do enough damage. There's also an orb upgrade to where you can dash and also drop a grenade. So my entire run consisted of throwing a grenade into a group and then dashing away, and it was a double whammy. And I was just kind of I looked like I'd ants in my pants, dashing all over the place. And one thought was, hey, maybe next time I'll take the dash combo instead of the kill combo. If I'm dashing everywhere anyway, I might as well, benefit from that. So maybe try the dash combo with the demolitions if you get that one orb upgrade that lets you drop a grenade every time you dash. It's just something to consider anyway. But ideally, I felt like even though the artificer suit was providing me with armor and damage, that's all good, don't get me wrong, but at higher NG levels, that plus 25% armor, it doesn't feel as good. When you're at NG 5 or 6, seeing that negative 990, whatever it is in the armor, it's like, well, I'm not getting anything from this. The damage is good, don't get me wrong, but even then I felt like the grenades just weren't doing enough. So I felt like my poison and my blades were doing much more damage than the grenades were. It was fun. So I need to be in the mood to play Demolitions, I think. That's just me. Lastly, we've got blades. I accidentally pushed NG3 with this recently. I know, I accidentally did. I was going on an XP run. I was spec'd for an XP run. I took like sweet pancakes rather than the Bishop's Blessed Bread. I didn't take any curse drinks because I was expecting to die. But then I'm like, oh, there's this orb upgrade. It's called Life Leech, and when I use Mortal Strike, I get health back. And it's not something you can take initially in the magic shop. It's something you have to find as an orb upgrade. But once I found it, I actually pushed all the way to the end. And believe it or not, using this assassin passive, it reduces the range of enemies detecting you. I ran by, I want to say, I ran through the barracks. I ran through the next stage. I can't remember the next stage. It's that eerie castle place. Anyway, and then the halls with the orbs. I also bypassed that. So like I ran past everybody. Now there is a couple of upgrades for Mortal Strike. I highly, highly, highly recommend. There's a couple that you can take right away. I think it's Phantasmal Strike, which it does this whole cone thing. It hits everyone behind your target. That AoE is massive. It actually hits a lot of things. So for AoE, like this Mortal Strike is actually super powerful. It's not like a single target kind of thing. Hidden Cuts is another ability where it kind of like does damage to other things nearby. I think it's like main hand damage or something like that. So at first I was like, Mortal Strike, but the more I upgraded it, and then that Life Leech, I was sitting in front of the boss, the Avatar. Every time he slammed his fist down, Mortal Strike got that health right back. It was a heal over time like the Warlock's Life Leech, but it came back. It wasn't as powerful, I think, but it was still good. So, yeah, I'm liking the blades more and more. And it's weird because you think like Blades, Assassin class, strike from the shadows, but there are like a million enemies. So, I can see an assassin working in a game where, there's a couple of enemies here, a couple of enemies there, and you're, like Assassin's Creed, taking down enemies in a castle one at a time. Not here. There are hundreds of enemies being thrown at you constantly. So, like, this whole sneaky approach, it's more of like a speed run class than an actual sneak from the shadows kind of class, in my opinion anyway. But Blades, it's something to consider anyway. You're going to want a lot of crit on this one because that's typically, the primary focus. So if you're going to like work on an intelligence build, definitely consider Blades because Mortal Strike hits very, very, very hard. And there you have it, a quick rogue guide for you. Hopefully you found this enjoyable. If you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing, support my videos, share them around. The more views I get, the more likely it is I'll make more videos of that particular game. This is Vince. Thanks for watching. Catch y'all next time. Take care.